launch party. I'm Christia DeShields.
And I am Tim Bounds, and we get to be your hosts for the night. So we are coming at you live right now. It is Tuesday night, and we are so glad that you're joining us. In fact, there are over 1,000 people all over the country who are joining us right now.
Yeah, we are so excited. Tonight, it's going to be fun, and it's going to be a celebration, but our hope is that it is more than that. Tonight, God is calling us into something, and we are so excited to lean in to hear what he's saying to us tonight.
That's right. Yeah. So what's the plan? Well, we are going to hear from our Never Settle author, Greg Holder. We'll also be hearing from other authors and musicians and leaders, people like best-selling authors John O'Leary and Sadie Rob Huff. And so as we hear all of these really amazing voices throughout the evening, our goal tonight is to talk about what it looks like to practically live out this hot and cold, never settled life.
Yeah, I'm so excited. And guys, we want to hear from you tonight. So you can reach us directly with your questions or comments by texting Never Settle, that's one word, to 22333.
Yes, and we're excited to see what you guys have to say to us. So first, for starters, we want you to watch this, and in just a moment, we'll hear from Greg.
You can make a difference in this world. I know as soon as many of you hear that, there's a reaction, a pushback. The last thing most of us need is another one of those you can do whatever you put your mind to self-help pep talks. I promise this is nothing of the sort. Everything that follows traces back to the grace of God, the sacrifice of Jesus, and the very real presence of the Holy Spirit in the lives of those who have accepted the offer of a new and utterly different life. So put your self-help fears aside and let's face the truth together. There is a reason so many have a visceral reaction to all this talk of making a difference. Beyond the epidemic levels of cynicism today, there is a legitimate wariness to starry-eyed optimism. There is no utopia on the horizon, no one-size-fits-all solution. We haven't grown past our problems, and let's face it, these days we're facing new challenges on top of old struggles. And yet, we dream. We still hope. So what is it inside us that spurs dreams of healing and justice and change? To answer this question requires a bigger and better story, the one that reaches back to the beginning. The urge to make things right comes from someplace deeper than you first imagined. It's not enough to say that you can make a difference in this world. You see, you were made to make a difference. Created in the image of the Most High God, you were made to get things done in this world. Perhaps like never before, the time has come to step out of the safe and humdrum, the mediocre, and yes, the lukewarm. Compelled by the strong words of Jesus in Revelation 3, this book will serve as a roadmap out of lukewarminess towards a faith that is soothingly hot and thirst-quenchingly cold. Along the way, we'll encounter practical choices that can ignite chain reactions of hope. It's time to live with a completely different perspective on life, to step into the adventure with a God whose plan for you is as real as anything you've experienced. Why? Because you were made for this. It's what you crave. It's what the world still desperately needs. And it starts today, the moment you vow to never settle. Oh my goodness, I just want to say thank you, first of all, to those who have helped pull all of this together. Thank you to those of you who are joining us. I know that you've been hearing about this book. You may have seen some things happening and being said on social media, but now it is officially available, and thank you for being a part of this party. But I really do want to say thank you to a whole bunch of people who have been praying about this, thinking about this, planning for it, and working really, really hard. In fact, in a few minutes, you're going to get a chance to just take a peek at some of the hard work that they've done to prepare these resources for us. And then along the way, we'll see some works of art that have sort of gathered around this Never Settle book. And I think it's just going to be a great moment for us to consider opportunities where we point people to these resources, maybe point people towards the book itself, all for God's glory, all for his kingdom's sake. See, here's the point. I think it's time for a different kind of word, for a different kind of thought to start rippling through our communities, our conversations, our world, really. Because if you think about it, what we're asking God to do is to start a chain reaction of sorts, a chain reaction of love and healing, yes, and justice and mercy and forgiveness, but maybe more than anything, hope. For all sorts of reasons, I believe God is calling us into this story to come alongside him in the healing and the restoring and the making things right. No, we're not the ones doing the heavy lifting, and no, we are not the ones who will make things right. It is Jesus, always Jesus. This story always comes back to him, which means I don't think you'll be surprised that the foundational thought of this book comes back to some of the specific words of Jesus, this time in the book of Revelation, to a church in a place called Laodicea. These are famous words to some people and confusing and maybe sometimes misunderstood to others. But let me just read you just a little bit of Revelation 3. Jesus says, I know your deeds, that you are neither cold nor hot. I wish you were either one or the other. So, because you are lukewarm, neither hot nor cold, I am about to spit you out of my mouth. Now, in the Greek, that is a much more vivid word that it means something else. We'll just leave it there. But I will tell you this. In the chapter entitled, What Makes Jesus Puke, which, by the way, I pitched to the publisher as the title of the book, and that just wasn't going to fly. But I will say that it did make it into the book as a chapter title. So in chapter 1, with that illustrious title, we're going to explore what Jesus really meant. We'll start off looking at a funny story about a shark diving cage and seasickness, so you got that to look forward to. An ancient geography lesson where we begin to learn, and here's the punchline, that hot and cold are both good. You see, we've been called into this world to be hot, like soothingly hot, to be cold, thirst-quenchingly cold. So the point here that Jesus is making is be a difference maker. Bring something into the world that the world is aching for. Bring something into the world that the world is thirsting for. But then, and here it is, let's vow to never settle for anything less. When we begin to understand what it is that Jesus is saying there, we, throughout the book, then start trekking our way out of the lukewarminess. And yes, that is a word that I made up. But I do think it describes the kind of life that we can no longer live. You see, I believe God is still up to something in this world. I believe God is inviting us to something in this world. And I believe we are longing for this. You've already heard it. We want to make a difference because, you see, we were made to make a difference. Now, there it is. You see, that's chapter 2, if you really want to think about it. In chapter 2, we begin to learn about this Kurdish refugee who lives with his family under an overpass just off a busy intersection in the city of Beirut. And what he taught me and some of my friends about how big the story of God is, and honestly, why people still dream. And then, of course, it all goes back to our story, the story that we find in Genesis. You see, that's our story. In the beginning, our generous, loving God created everything. And I mean everything. Sparkling galaxies, blazing sunsets, sharp-edged canyons and soft desert dunes, DNA and duck-billed platypuses, chin-strapped penguins and the children who giggle at them. God did it all. But then what we see in this chapter is that with a little help from some Hebrew grammar and an old Whitney Houston song with the key change to end all key changes, we learn that we are the pinnacle of creation's song. That means that you and I are made in the image of God. And that means that every person you see, every person you encounter or hear about is made in the image of the Most High God. Come on, that means we should be treating each other differently. We should be listening differently. We should be loving differently and doing things differently in this world, because we were called to bring order out of the chaos, to bring beauty into the world, and to bring shalom to each other. We do all of this honoring the God who has vowed to make things right in this no longer right world. That's what we've been called to do. That's what it means to make a difference. That's the hope of the world. That's what it means to be hot and cold. And I know that sounds like a lot, but I really do believe that this is what we've been called into, what we've been made for. And it really starts, interestingly enough, with really small steps. Even these smallish moments of your life can set off chain reactions of grace and goodness that will ripple throughout the story in ways that you may not even be able to imagine. I want you to see if you could just dream of what would happen if you partnered with the God who called all of this into existence and who also calls you by name. You see, the rest of what we'll learn is that there are choices that we get to make, choices about how we view things, choices about how we approach conflict, how we deal with the challenges in a very broken world. Chapter 9 is the decision to wait on the Lord. And we learn about this and wrapping ourselves around his strength in a very harrowing story. In chapter 10, there is a 21st century call for us to consider how we will wisely engage our digital world. And then lastly, this idea of biblical hospitality. I think it might be the Christian distinctive for this day full of anger and fear, how we welcome one another into our lives and into our homes. I believe God is calling us to all of this, but I'll tell you this much. Each step out of the tepid, the lukewarm, the bland, each step will set off chain reactions. Each of these steps will create ripples in the story for the glory of God. And the Holy Spirit is waiting to transform you along the way. So consider this the invitation. We're asking you to consider a different way of thinking, a different way of living, really, in this world, of loving, of speaking, of doing things that will actually make a difference. Now, I'm telling you, such a life is not always easy. I'm admitting to you that it won't always blend in. You will sometimes stand out. It's sometimes shocking. Sometimes it's soothing. It's enduring. It's healing. It's loving, because without loving outrageously, the rest of this means nothing. What I really want you to hear is that this is a life that is aligned with the God of the universe. This is a life that is tapped into the crackling energy of the one who made all of this and who made you for more than you imagined and loves you more than you could ever dream of. This is the way out of lukewarminess. And I'm telling you, it'll be worth it.
Imagine what the world will look like if we put our differences aside. Imagine what the world will look like. What if we put our difference aside? All of our idols, all of our pride. What if we laid our weapons down? What if we walked in each other's shoes? What if we saw another point of view? What if we came together now? Imagine what the world would look like if we put differences aside. Imagine what the world would look like. Imagine what the world would look like if we put differences aside. Imagine what the world will look like. 'Cause I hear blood crying from the ground. Somebody's baby been shot down. In this darkness, is there healing for their sorrow? Can we just stay in the fight? It won't happen overnight. We gotta wake up, we can't wait until tomorrow. So bring your policies and politics and lay them on the altar. Your offenses, your past tenses, let them go. 'Cause we've been sleeping for much too long. There's so much work that must be done. Spirit, give us strength and help us make it so. Imagine what the world will look like if we put differences aside. Imagine what the world will look like. Imagine what the world will look like if we put differences aside. Imagine what the world will look like. Come on, let's declare this together. 'Cause walls, I see walls tumbling down. Walls, I see walls tumbling down. And chains, I see chains breaking apart. Oh, chains, I see chains break apart. And the world will look like if we put our differences aside. Imagine what the world will look like.
Oh man, what a great song and what a great way for us to just kind of kick off this conversation this evening. I'm so grateful for Kenny's lyrics that are asking us to imagine a different kind of world, a world where we put our anger, our pride, our idols to the side and we actually reach out and tear down walls. What would that world look like? It's a really important question. In fact, I would ask you the question, if you could come up with one word that would describe the world that you're longing for, what would that one word be? Now, we'd actually love to hear your response to that question, and you can text us at the number that Christia, you mentioned just a few minutes ago. If you text the word never settle, all one word, to 22333 and submit your answers to us. We would love to hear the one word you would use to describe the world you're longing for.
Another way that you all can stay connected with us tonight is through social media. So we'll be doing 2 giveaways tonight. One is this Never Settle Yeti mug to keep your drinks hot and cold and not lukewarm, right?
There you go.
And the other is some custom artwork by one of my favorite artists here in St. Louis, Elizabeth London, who created this specifically for this book. And there's actually prayers from the book on her artwork. So it's really, really exciting. And here's how you can maybe win one of these. So all you have to do is follow and tag at @GregHolder_ on Instagram and take a picture of where you're watching from, and we'll announce the 2 winners later.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I love this idea, Christia, of us kind of almost starting like a social media movement here, right, in the middle of all of this. And if you think about it, I mean, we all could use more good news and good posts and words of hope on social media, couldn't we? I think so, right? So speaking of good news, I'm really excited that now I get to hand it over to one of my favorite people. He's a pastor, he's a leader, Pastor David Hawkins. And David is actually going to kind of turn the tables here just a minute, and he's going to actually put Greg in the hot seat. So David, will pass it to you.
Well, the hot seat you're in.
All right.
I'm so excited to be here with you tonight.
I'm glad you are.
Well, I've had the honor and the privilege of reading the wonderful book, Never Settle. And I'll tell you from my experience, just my small synopsis, it was full of joy, it was full of expectation, and it was convicting. So reading the stories, though, the adventures, you have no chill. Okay, that's a hood word for you really go all the way out when it comes to your adventures, which kind of was this thing that I was dealing with about the title. Why the word settle? And what are you sensing?
Yeah. Okay, so early on in the book, David, this idea of settling, I just kind of play with the word, and I'm always fascinated with where words come from, and you know what it is as a preacher. You just always those are your tools, and so early on, settle was actually this idea of resting, and it really, if you think back, for better or worse, I think we can all imagine settlers doing what settlers do, and they stopped. They stopped progressing, they put down roots, they made their home, and they rested. Okay, but in recent days, we know that the word settle has kind of become this loaded word. We talk about settling in so many different ways. We tell our kids to settle down, but then a young couple wants to settle down. We settle our debts, sometimes we settle our bets, but there's this loaded term recently, I would say, in the last few decades, where settled means I'm just going to accept the way things are, even if I don't like the way things are. I'm just going to settle. And so you take these 2 ideas of really just putting down roots and accepting things the way they are, even though you know they could be better. And I began to think, well, I know it's an overused term, but I don't want us to put down roots in a land of less than hopeful, less than loving, less than helpful, less than all of these things, because that's not what God made us to do. And so that's why that word settle is actually kind of a big deal to me.
Well, that pivots to this next thought, which I believe this whole idea of settling, as you just explained, less than, we're not doing our part to the degree we're called to. We've been elbow to elbow in ministry for 14 years.
We sure have.
We've traveled around the world together.
We sure have.
So you've always spoken about the local church having a huge impact in its territory, and then you talk about the Big C church.
Right.
You have always had this hope, this expectation, this vision for the church. Could you kind of give us more of what you feel about the church's importance and role in today's society?
Well, I think the church is essential, and we have the good news of the gospel, and I'm not saying that there aren't things that we see in this world that don't discourage us and beat us down and fill us with confusion and doubt and worry. That is absolutely true. In fact, we talk about that in the book. Look at that side of the world with eyes wide open. But I've got to also look at the whole story and what Jesus has done. And I have to be a person of hope. I mean, that's the only way I can live, David. I know you agree with me. We talked about this. But I believe that the church has been entrusted with the hope of the world. And so we've got the story, man. In the book, I talked about some research that really bothers me. Barna research showed that over half of U.S. churchgoers have never heard of the Great Commission. They don't know what the Great Commission is.
Wow.
Now, I know your folks know what the Great Commission is, and I'm sure hoping our folks do. But Jesus called us to go into the world, not to play it safe, not to hide behind walls and hang out with people that look like us and sound like us and vote like us and think like us. But he called us to go into the world to make a difference. And I believe the local church and local churches partnering together, partnering with local churches across the world, that's the capital C church. And I still think that's how things are going to get done in this world.
Listen, man, I need a Hammond B3 right here and Jesse can hit it. Dun,
I wish
dun.
you had it. I wish you had it.
I love it. So you said play it safe. And when reading Never Settle, I sense this tone, as in our field, preaching and teaching and being a speaker on many stages, we read a lot of material.
Right.
And you get a tone, you get a sense of things. The word I came up with is patient urgency.
Oh, wow.
That's kind of how I felt as I was reading. I'm like, wow, this is great. And then I felt urgency. Are you sensing some urgency for the church today, for the believer today, for the world today?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because, again, what we see is not right. The world is not as it should be. I mean, that traces all the way back to the sin of our first parents. But we've been making that mistake every day since then. But God is not finished with me, you, or this world. So here's the thing. When you and I were in Rwanda, I mean, we were just, you making me think, brother. Now, they're gonna call us off of the stage here in a minute because we're gonna go over. But when you and I were in Rwanda and we saw people that were torn apart by strife and genocide from two different tribes in the room together, and we're talking to them about how pastors and church leaders can forgive one another and confess to one another. Yeah. And I remember just seeing healing begin to break out. I'm not foolish enough to think that was the end of that story, but it was the beginning of a story. Maybe it was the beginning of a story. Wow. So I got to live that way. And so that means that there's an urgency to it. I believe that at the end of the story, God's going to have the last word. But somehow, for some reason, he has called you and me into the mix right now to do this with him, to not wait until then, but to be a part of something that's going to ripple through eternity. So I'm willing and have to wait for the end of the story, but he's called me to something now, man, and that's where the urgency is.
And right now, that's the burden.
Right now.
Like, no matter who we are, jump in.
Oh, yeah. It's not about Hall of Famers, whoever that may be.
Right.
Certainly not me. But I take great comfort in some of the places in Scripture where I see that God is just using people. Sometimes we don't even know them by name.
Yes.
There's that chapter in Hebrews where he goes through all of those Hall of Famers, and then it's just one of my favorite phrases, and we talk about it in one of the chapters. And there were others.
Can I say that messed me up?
Oh, really?
The reader, when you get it, that right there, I've read Scripture for a number of years, and I've never paid attention, and there were others.
Yeah.
Well, that's
man,
going to be amazing.
I'm hoping I get to be one of the others, and you just think about these folks who really, they made the right choice, and they just put one foot in front of the other, trusting God in faithful obedience. And I believe they have changed things that you and I will not even understand this side of heaven. Yeah. But I got to believe that.
Last question.
Yeah.
What is the desire that you have for the person who will read Never Settle?
It's really related to really what we were just saying right there. I mean, I would just connect it to that. I believe that if we are made to make a difference, and we are,
Yeah.
we bear the image of God, which it is about dignity. Come on, it is about value.
I agree.
It's about doing this together. But it is about responsibility too. So we've been called into this, and that means every one of us. So what I would hope people would do if they read the book is that they would begin to understand that God has called them, wired them to be a part of making a difference in this world. And what they're called to do is going to look different than what I'm called to do. We're both pointing towards the same Jesus. But we're all called and wired to get into this game and to do something for the glory of God now. So my hope and prayer, David, would be that people would go, okay, I'm going to take the next step. Just the next step and the one after that. And that does begin to set off those chain reactions and those that start to ripple throughout eternity. And I just think part of what we get to do in eternity future is God just is going to connect the dots and say, you had no idea that 3 generations later, that one conversation you had. Isn't that going to be great?
Yes.
But we got to take the next faithful step. That's what I hope people do.
Listen, I am excited. I can't wait to pull my community, my neighborhoods into reading it, because I believe it's that life-changing. And thank you for pouring your heart into what I'll call the prophetic tone that is needed today.
Oh, wow.
Thank you so much.
Wow. Thank you, man. I love you.
Appreciate you.
Thanks, David and Greg, for that honest conversation. It feels like this book is really something that we need right now. What really sticks out to me is that the same God that brought peace to the storm lives in us, and he has endowed us to be peacemakers as well. So that's something that really stood out to me. So thank you all for that conversation.
Yeah, for me, it's this idea that this world really is longing for something different. And it connects back to the question we asked you just a couple of minutes ago, and you already sent in some of the answers to the one word that you would use to describe the world that you long for. So just, Christina, help me read some of these words, but peace, united, loving, hope.
Shalom, that's one of my favorite words. Healed, restored, welcoming.
Yeah, simple, kind, love, supportive.
And joyful, blessed, relationships.
Yeah, truth, grace, happy, contentment, absolutely. See, the thing is that there's this quote in the book that I want to read to you here. It's just, when you ask the question, all those words are such good words, how do we get to a world like that? Well, the line of the book says, every choice in your day is crackling with God's redemptive power. Now think about that, because what that means is that our choices actually have a kingdom impact. Right? So.
Yeah.
So
what can we do today to take the next step? Our next speaker, Sadie Rob Huff, is going to talk to us about practical ways to take that next step. What does it look like to live an intentional life for God?
Hey guys, I want to introduce you to someone that you may already know, Sadie Rob Huff. For many of you, you first knew her, saw her, and watched her grow up as a part of the Robertson family on Duck Dynasty. Since then, she has become a New York Times bestselling author, and I think is one of the most important voices for young Christians, and particularly for young Christian women these days. Her voice is so important. Her words are so encouraging. And so we're thrilled to have her here at the launch party. And so, Sadie, I just want to say, first of all, thank you for a very kind and generous endorsement of Never Settle. For those of you who don't have the book, you'll see her words at the front of it. And then thanks for being a part of this party, and thanks for helping us stir things up.
Yes, I'm so excited, and congrats to you.
So, Sadie, the last time I saw you was at your wedding and that amazing weekend, the worship concert the night before, and then just that beautiful celebration. So let me just start off by asking, how's Christian? How are you guys as a newlywed couple in 2020, this year of so many challenges?
Man, we are doing great, honestly. So we got married, and it's kind of crazy. So our whole dating life, we were long distance, and then we got married and then went straight into a quarantine. So we've really made up for lost time, getting to really spend a lot of bonding time, but we've been great. We moved back to Louisiana and by the family, and that's been really sweet.
Listen, I think 2020 has accelerated a lot of these conversations that each of us are having and how we're facing the challenges of our days. I was thinking about your books, and I know that all three of your book titles have the word live in them, and I've heard you talk about this. I know that that was intentional. I know that there's a reason why live is such an important word for you. Would you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. So live is such an important word to me in my life because live is an action. It's a verb. It's something that you go about and you do. And I think that a lot of people have this gift of life. Obviously, if you're breathing, you have the gift of life. God breathed life into you, and then we put no action behind it and no intention behind it, and we just sit on it. And I think a lot of times, especially young people, you tend to waste it in a sense of just with all this stuff that is distracting you from the purpose that you actually were born to live. And so I just want to remind people that live is a verb, that it's an action, it's something you live out, and that there's a path of life and there's a path of death. I talk about that in this book, Live. The last book was Live Fearless, and I talk about how to truly live out that full action that we have in life, we have to get past the fears that hold us back. The first one was Live Original. If you really want to live confident in the original creation you got to be, well, then we gotta get to know why we were really created. And so it's just that idea of thinking about our life as a gift, thinking about it with intention, and putting action behind the gift that we've been given.
I love this, Sadie. I love the fact that you're talking about an intentional way of living. Now, you mentioned this in your latest book, that these decisions that a person makes lead us down a path of light or darkness towards life or death. And really, if you choose the right path, what you're saying is it leads to a life that thrives. I love that word. So talk a little bit about some of the choices and challenges that young people in particular are facing these days in the context of where we are in 2020.
Yeah. Well, the Bible talks about in Ephesians to have nothing to do with the worthless fruits of darkness. And whenever it said that, it always stuck out to me because I think a lot of times the temptation for young people to feel is that, or a lie that we believe is that we're worthless. You feel like I don't have a purpose. I'm not worth anything. I don't mean anything to anybody, especially whenever we're single, we start to get dramatic and think those things. And when I saw that word in the Bible, worthless, I realized that it's not that you are ever worthless, but some of the choices that we're making are worth less than who we are and who we're called to be. And what's worth less is down that path of death. It's sinful nature, it's addiction, it's all these things. It's not that you're worthless if you're going through that. It's just that that's worth less than who you are. But there is this life and a life abundantly, and it has the fruit of who God is. It's alive in you. It's love, it's joy, it's peace, it's patience, it's kindness. And the more you deny the worthless things of darkness, and you step into the beautiful things that God has for you, denying yourself and saying yes to the Spirit, then you get to a life of thriving. And for some reason, the enemy's made that seem not very cool in today's world, to turn down the darkness things and to say yes to life. But it's so ridiculous and it's such a lie because everybody knows to have life and have abundantly would be the coolest thing ever. So it's just a lie that I try to help people understand and just map it out really biblically. I hope that my books are just a gateway for people to go read the Bible.
Sadie, I think they are exactly that. And your books do invite people deeper into the story of God. And it reminds me of a point that I try to make in one of the chapters about how we are image bearers of the Most High God. When you get into the story, you can see that in the words of Gandalf from The Hobbit, there's more to you than you know. So I love that you're calling us, all of us really, to not believe the lies, to not believe the words that we sometimes hear in person or that we read on social media. There is more to us than we know. So let me ask you this. In this loud world, with all of these words crashing in, you specifically in this book talk about the power of words. That means a lot to me and to the folks that are on our team. When Proverbs says that words can lead to life or death, would you talk about that a little bit? I think we need to remind ourselves of how and why we use our words.
Yeah, that is one of the most impactful scriptures I keep at the forefront of my mind because our tongue holds the power of life and death. Like that is a very big thing to say. But when you really think about it and you look at it, you really can see it. I actually was sitting with a girl last night and she just started crying because she said, whenever I was young, I've always had this artistic creative ability, and my parents just were very negative about it. Always kind of just talked about how that was stupid. That's not really a gifting. That's not really something you want to do in life. That's not going to make you money. All these things. And essentially they're speaking death to her dream, to her creativity, to her gifting. She said it wasn't until this year, she's like over 20 years old, that somebody said to her, hey, you're really gifted in that. That's an amazing gift. We could use that here. And she kind of it just sparked life into her. And so she actually had a place to use her ability. And that is just a small example of somebody I talked to last night, of the words that we speak over one another. They carry life or death. If you're speaking something like that's stupid, that's never going to work, if somebody's saying that over you, that's essentially killing a dream. That's killing your creativity. But if you speak life, and it's just like the Lord, like whenever God made man, like he spoke everything into existence. And so we're made in his image. What we speak, it really matters. And I think that that's something that we should hold really, not, I would say humbly and proudly, just to know that our words really matter.
I couldn't agree with you more. And those words oftentimes are expressed in relationships, in friendships. And I know that those matter so much to both of us, but I know how much you love family and how much your friendships and your community around you means to you. What would you say to a young person who says at this point they don't have those kinds of relationships? They don't have those kinds of family or friends who are speaking life and encouraging them and speaking hope into their lives. What would you say to them right now?
Yeah, that's good. I would say, honestly, the first thing I would say is if you have a Bible, read it. Let God's word speak life over you, because essentially, yes, what we say matters, and it does matter, and what we say to other people, it does matter, but the ultimate thing that matters over any voice of man is the voice of God. And so if you're rooted in what God says about you and God's already spoken over you and the life that God's already given you, then it really doesn't matter if somebody speaks something over you that if it doesn't line up with his word, then you can throw it away. Or if it does, you can hang on to it. But essentially, it all needs to fall on the foundation of what God's already spoken. And that needs to be the priority. So, yes, I hope that one day in life that somebody comes alongside of you and they do speak those words and you're able to hear it from another person. But before that happens, and if that doesn't ever happen, then rely on the word of God and let that truth just illuminate in your mind. And I would also say, because we do live in 2020, even though it is a hard year, we also have the best technology. And so there are like thousands and thousands, millions of YouTube videos of preaching, of sermons. Every church posts a sermon every Sunday. And if you need to listen to that and take what the pastor's saying personally and seriously, then do it. If you want to go get a book, there's Amazon Prime. You can have it tomorrow. Read a book about what the Bible says about you. There's so many incredible voices these days, and so much incredible access to that. And so I would just say, do what you need to do to get that encouragement that you need.
Listen, I've got one more quick question for you, but before we wrap it up, let me just thank you. Thank you for your perspective. Thank you for your influence. Thank you for your courage in the way that you speak out in this world. Listen, I'm grateful, Sadie. I've told you this before. I'm humbled that you are a part of this event, that you are helping us stir up this never settle movement. So everyone who's listening to this interview, I'm serious. Grab a copy of Live. It is so practical. It is so real time. How to deal with haters, how to deal with your own jealousy of others, how to lean into this life that God is calling you to. It's just, it's worth it. So it's available wherever books are sold, and I want to encourage you to check that out. But now, Sadie, what would you say to people of all ages who want to make a difference, who want to start what we call a chain reaction, who want to live this intentional life we keep talking about right now in 2020? For someone who's not going to wait to get started on this journey with God, what is their next step?
It's great. Well, first of all, our family is so excited for you and your book, and I think it speaks a lot about you that you're getting other people and shouting other people's books out in the midst of yours coming out. That's just so awesome. And so, thank you for shouting out "Live" and just the message, because I do believe it's such God timing for it to come out. At first, it was kind of funny. People were like, "Do you feel like that was kind of weird that Live came out?" And it's like, to live an exciting and fulfilling life right when we're in a quarantine. And I was like, no, I think it's perfect timing, because this is the time where people would want to settle. They would want to say, I'm you know what, I'm too young, I'm too old, I don't have the resources, I can't go out and pursue my dream, I'm locked up in the house. But I would say today, like practically, if you are like, I want to make a difference in the world, there's one of my favorite verses, and it's very popular, but it's the verse about don't let anyone look down on you because you're young. Paul says to Timothy, but set an example in love and speech and purity and conduct and faith. Then he goes on to say, and don't neglect the gift that you've been given. So I think about that a lot, and it's like, okay, how do I set an example no matter what age I am? Well, you set an example in faith and love and purity. And if you think about it, even the fruits of who Jesus is, when you think about love, joy, peace, the fruit we're supposed to show, if you see the fruit of Jesus in 2020 in the world today, it is shocking and it is noticeable. And so the first thing I would say is act in that love. And the only way you can do that is invite the Lord in. Act in love, act in peace, act in patience and kindness and goodness. Those seem like little things, but I'm telling you, if you saw a news anchor today be kind to somebody or act in a peaceful state, you'd be kind of shocked. You'd be like, that's different. That's starting a chain reaction in my life, because I just watch the news and I'm not afraid. Or I feel, like kind of a peace and a protection. Or I feel like I'm loved by somebody. I felt kindness. And so just those fruits of Jesus, I think that changes things, putting it into action. And I think another thing is we do, like I said, we have technology, and I know technology can be used for a lot of evils, but it can also be used for a lot of goods. And so just like we talked about the power in our words, you have the ability to write a caption every day if you want to. And just by that caption, I cannot even tell you how many people I have seen literally start the relationship with the Lord because of my Instagram account. And it's so crazy, but it's so amazing, because they're, scrolling and something stops them in their tracks. And as they begin to read, they're like, what is this? What about this just made me feel, again, that love, that peace, that pursuit, that I have worth, or that I have purpose in my life. And so use the words that you have, use the platform that you have, whether that's your workspace, your Instagram, your social media, and also in whatever area in life that you're going at, act in the fruits of the Spirit. Those are all things that literally change the trajectory of people's life. And it seems simple, but they're really profound. And so that's what I would say, to put action behind your day.
Oh my goodness, this has been so good. We could keep talking about this for a long time, but we won't. So how about this, one more time, from all of us, Sadie, thank you.
There is safety in the know, but where you want me, I've never gone. But safety game I love, when I let fear and pain and heartache be enough. I don't wanna settle for less of you. I don't wanna quit before I break through. I wanna be hot or cold, go where you go, do what you do. I don't wanna settle for less of you. There is. there is solace
my silence, go through the motions, and just keep quiet. But silence is not where you've called me. So I lay all I've been and am here at your feet. I lay all that I could ever hope to be. I don't wanna settle for less of you. I don't wanna quit before I break through. I wanna be hot or cold, go where you go, do what you do. I don't wanna settle for less of you. I don't wanna settle for less of you. I don't wanna quit before I break through. I wanna be hot or cold, go where you go, do what you do. I don't wanna settle for less of you. I don't wanna settle for less of you. I don't wanna quit before I break through. I wanna be hot or cold, go where you go, do what you do. I don't wanna settle for less of you. I don't wanna settle for less of you. I don't wanna settle for less of you.
So you guys wrote this song, which is always amazing to me, being around artists, just how that happens. And I want to talk to you about that. But first, I want you all to meet Matt and Sarah, who are musicians, and I'm fortunate to work with them, and I see them and experience their talent. And I just wanted to give you guys a chance to talk a little bit behind the scenes, like the making of this song. Can you guys just give me a little bit of that?
Yeah, I think when we got an opportunity to, come alongside this book, we heard it was going to be written, and we wanted to write a song that kind of spoke to that and the idea of never settling. And it's actually funny, we actually wrote a different song first.
Oh, wow.
And it's a song called Let It Be Done. But when we started writing that song, it was, do you remember the tagline that we put on it for the song? We wanted it to be...
We wanted it to be the Never Settle song.
Yeah.
But once we wrote that song, it started to take on a different form, and we ended up really liking that song too. But looking back at it, we were like, but that's not the Never Settle song. Let's not settle for that song being the Never Settle song.
Way to live it out, Sarah. That's awesome.
We did another one, and that ended up being Never Settle that you guys just heard.
So what's it like working together? Because I do think one of the things that comes out, hopefully, in the book is that, we were made to make a difference, but we were not made to do this alone. We're made to do this with each other. What's it like collaborating with another artist?
It's definitely interesting, but like for us, we both have different strengths, right? So like I lean more into like chord structures and some lyric things, and Sarah comes up with these killer melodies.
Yeah.
So she'll just start humming something after I'm playing a chord progression, and then we'll be like, oh, well, let's put the words to that because that's so good, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So now you're getting to a question that for me, I noticed maybe the second, third time I listened to it, I just started enjoying the just the handiwork of it all and how God worked through you, but really pretty in-your-face lyrics. But the song is so, I don't know, it just flies under the radar. It's just like this really winsome, almost soft song, but then the lyrics kind of come up at you. Was that intentional?
Yeah, I loved just keeping it like mellow. We thought about, adding more instrumentation to it to kind of help drive those, statements that you make in the lyrics of the song. But later on, we were just like, no, we just love how gentle it is and just a gentle reminder of the goodness of this life that the Lord has for you. And then it doesn't have to be just this big, push. It can be just this gentle, reminder of, I will not settle for less than you, Jesus.
And what's interesting is if you catch yourself singing along to it, sometimes you don't even notice that the words are saying that because the melody is so gentle and you're singing along and then you think about it and you're like, wait a second,
it just kind of
what am I
sneaks
actually
into
saying?
your brain and you're considering this truth, which is, I think what I love about that is when you mention that, Sarah, there's one of the thoughts that we make is that, these chain reactions that start, you don't have to be like a Hall of Famer. You don't have to be somebody who's everybody knows about. Just your obedience, that one faithful step followed by another faithful step, can really set off a chain reaction in the world. And I get it when you're describing it that way. So it really was intentional. So if people wanted to hear more of your music, what's the easiest way to do that?
Definitely any social media outlets or our website is matt.sarahsingsongs.com, and that's our handle for everything as well.
Yeah, which I love that because Matt and Sarah do sing songs. And then when it comes to Never Settle, it's a part of an album that's coming out, so we really ought to be paying attention to, and I think we're going to put this on the bottom of the screen here, but we should be paying attention to your postings because there's an album coming out when?
In October.
Okay.
Beginning of October.
Okay. All right. Very cool. But right now, people can start getting this song.
All the places you can stream.
Very cool. And if you're not careful, the truth of that song, the challenge of that song is going to just kind of sneak its way into your thoughts and your prayers. And that's exactly what you guys wanted. And I just let me just say thank you. And I'm honored and humbled and just so excited to see what God does with this. So thanks for collaborating and with each other. Thanks for collaborating with me and with us. And thanks for sharing a little bit of that story. And thank you for the beautiful song.
Wow, those are really powerful lyrics. I don't want to settle for less of you. What do you think? So I know that's going to be one of my prayers this week.
Yeah, me too. I think it's what the world needs, Christia, but it's what I need. And I need those words to be in my heart and in my mind and as a part of my prayers. And when you go back to what Sadie was saying a minute ago about the power of words, those are just good words. And how about Sadie? I'm just so grateful for this next generation of leaders that are refusing to settle for the status quo.
Yeah, you know what else we need? Community. Yeah. One of my favorite things about Never Settle is how Greg reminds us that we can't do this on our own. We're going to have struggles and questions, and that's a part of life, but we need each other.
Yeah, that's right. So one of the ways that you can kind of practically live that out and actually do this is by grabbing a few friends and going through the book together. So there are some great questions that are at the end of the book for discussion. And then there's these free small group videos that, guys, honestly, they're unlike any small group videos I've seen before. I tell you what, take a look at this example of one. And then after that, we're going to hear a profoundly personal story from someone who never settled.
Deep down, this idea of lukewarminess, it just doesn't appeal to us. Not after all we've seen going on in our world these days. I mean, things aren't right, are they?
My worldview has to extend past this world.
I know for me, one of the things has been just spending time in the morning with God.
The worldview is anchored not in what I can control, but anchored in the one who is in control. But how do you guys live with hope? Because you just said that this isn't theory for you.
See, we're talking about a God that never changes.
It's so important in those moments to write it down, right? Write down those stories for yourself. I find myself doing that and leaving a note in my phone.
I believe that with my whole heart. There is nothing, there's no situation, there's no
experience that God can't redeem.
This is what it looks like to live into our identity and up to our calling.
Yeah. Well, it's beautifully said. Man, this is a good book. Who wrote this? Oh, I did not know we were live already. Well, Greg, I want to begin by congratulating you on writing what I think is a magnificent and required book for these times that we currently find ourselves living in. And for the community who is tuning in right now from not only around St. Louis, Missouri, where the crossing is, where Greg lives, where I live, but throughout the Midwest, throughout the United States, and knowing Greg, knowing his reach throughout the entire world, I want to thank you and welcome you to our book launch for Never Settle. A little brief introduction of me. My name is John O'Leary. I am a proud St. Louis, Missouri guy. Grew up in this area, was at age 9 burned on 100% of my body in this area. And through God's grace and through this community and through the works and the prayers of so many other people in this community and around the world, a little guy with no chance at life went on to not only survive the fire to 100% of his body, but eventually, and it took a lot of time, but eventually to thrive in life. Tonight, I have the distinct honor of being part of this book release celebration and unpacking a little bit of the book with you tonight. I've read the book now through twice. I love the book. I think it's a wake-up call from being lukewarm, not only in our faith. Too frequently, we're lukewarm, lackadaisical in our faith, but also lukewarm in our marriage, accepting less than enough in our relationships in our community, being less than generous with those who have so much less than what we have in our own lives. So this is a wake-up call to never settle in any aspect of life. And my favorite chapter from this book, and Greg, I told you this, man, but my favorite chapter is about halfway through. It's chapter 6. The title of it is Chain Reaction. Chain Reaction. And just to share with you the gravitas of where this chapter is going to take you, I'm going to read to you the first 5 words from Chain Reaction. So get comfortable, my family and friends, leaders, readers. Here we go. On Thanksgiving, my dad died. So this chapter called Chain Reaction from a book on the fullness of life begins with the words, on Thanksgiving, my dad died. Greg then goes on, and if I share with you the emotional background of this story, I'll lose it. I'm an emotional guy. A good dog food commercial will get me. Okay, so I'm not going to unpack the entire story for you right now. I'll let Greg do that in the writing of the book, Never Settle. But it got me as I read about Greg's father and the impact that Greg's father had on Greg, the impact that Greg now is having on all of us, including myself, and the impact of that chain reaction into eternity on lives that we will never even meet this side of eternity, made me think of someone in my own life who had a similar impact on me. And for me, Greg, and for me, Crossing, and for me, family, and for me, readers, it's my dad. It's my father. My dad, his name is Denny O'Leary. He's a remarkable human being. He's a faithful steward of what he has received, but he's also not had an easy life. My dad, and Greg unpacked some of the challenges that his father has experienced, but my dad has gone through 3 decades of Parkinson's disease. This is the last book signing we did in 2020 before everything shut down. What do you see as those ladies and gentlemen are lined up not to meet me? They're lined up to meet a man who has chosen to never settle, and in doing so has erupted into this chain reaction. What do you see in my dad's face? And this is as important because your salvation is not only about you, your life. Contrary to what we have been taught too frequently, I think, in life, it's not just really about you. It's ultimately about how we can advance the entire kingdom for those around us. So what do you see in his face? That's part of it. But the chain reaction, man, that's what chapter 6 is unpacking. What do you see in their lives? And right now, as you're staring at the screen, I hope you're saying words like joy, faith, hope, love, happiness, peace, conviction, faithfulness. A man who is hot, not lukewarm, hot for life. You see it in his face, but the beauty of a chain reaction is it cascades forward. It cascades forward into life. I sat with my dad 5 years ago, my friends, and we're on his screen porch. He just spilt an iced tea. He does Parkinson's disease. He moves around a bit, so he's in his wheelchair. He spills a drink. My mother leaves the screen porch. She's going to the kitchen to get some towels. And as she's doing so, my dad has this almost goofy grin, joy-filled grin on his face. And I said, Dad, how can you be so happy in life when you have so many things to be discouraged by? And he looked at me almost surprised, and he said, John, how can I not be when I have so many things in life to be grateful for? So my friends, as fires burn out west, as politics farther divide us down party lines, as we look around a nation with 30 million people currently between jobs and anger everywhere and a whole lot of reason to just to settle and take care of yourself. Forget about your brothers and sisters. Just take care of you. Just take care of you. I want you to sit down for a moment next to a guy who just chooses to never settle. That's what I had the opportunity of doing 5 years ago with my dad, Greg. I'm with my dad. I'm learning from him. I'm at his feet, looking up at his joy, at his smile, at a man who says, how could I not be when I have so many reasons to be grateful? So here's what I said. Dad, can you give me 3 things you're grateful for because of Parkinson's disease? Because of the worst, because of this struggle, because of this disease and this diagnosis that has taken everything from you physically. Can you give me just 3 things, Dad, you're grateful for because of Parkinson's disease? So as part of the Never Settle book launch, I wrote down the 3 things my dad said. I'm going to put them on the screen in front of you right now. If you're at home, you're on a screen, you're on a laptop, you got it on the big screen right now in front of you, awesome. You may want to write these down. I think one way to remain anything other than lukewarm in life, one way to choose to never settle in life, is to choose to step into every day with profound gratitude to the God who gave you life and eventually will invite you into an even more full life afterwards. What a gift. So I'm going to go through the 3 things my dad shared with me. It's the beginning of a chain reaction in my life. More on that in a moment. The first thing this joy-filled man said. 3 things, Dad, you're grateful for because of Parkinson's disease. Number 1, John, I'm grateful it wasn't a more serious disease. He said it could have been worse, which is true, leaders. But when you're the one struggling with it, when you're the one carrying that cross up the hill, to recognize it could have been worse is radical. It's a man who chooses to never settle. He's grateful for what he's got. Secondly, he said, John, I used to be so busy in life, but now I have nothing but time to reflect on who I am, what ultimately matters, and where God is in my walk. And I am supremely grateful for that relationship with God, for this time to grow closer to him, to never settle. And then he says, third, finally, John, I've always liked your mom. To which I said, Dad, I'm glad you like my mom. I'm glad you like my mom. You've been married to my mom for 52 years. You started dating my mom when she was a freshman in high school. I'm glad you like my mom, Dad. To which he responds, remember, he's in a wheelchair. He's got iced tea all over him. It's just the 2 of us on the screen porch. He has a very faint voice. He's in physical pain all the time. And here's what my dad says back to me. John, everybody else is pushing me farther and farther and farther and farther away. Everybody else is seeing less and less value in my life. But your mother, my wife, keeps drawing closer and closer and closer. And I love her, and I'm blessed by her, and I'm grateful for her, John. I'm just grateful for her. And Greg, this is the overlap. Your father was never cured from the tragedy that struck him decades later. He was never cured of what befell upon him, but he was healed. And so when I read your story and thought of my dad's, I thought of the 2 fathers in our life and the father they pointed us toward, and how God chose perhaps not to cure them of their ailments, but to heal them perfectly, Tonight, my friends, as we gather to be reminded that in the midst of forest fires in the West, and divisions in our politics and in society, and challenges that you face financially and relationally and personally, as you choose to consider, shall I crawl into a hole and try to disappear and wish the world away, or shall I climb out, walk away from the lukewarmness that once binded me back from who God was calling me to be, and ultimately choose to never settle in my life, to recognize that God is not done with you. The foundation of your life remains firm, and the best of it all remains in front of you. This is the truth, not only unpacked in the Gospels. It's going to be revealed to you again as you step into a beautiful book that my friend, my brother, my pastor, Greg, has provided to all of us. And he ends chapter 6. It's a chapter called Chain Reaction. And I'm sorry, I'm amped up tonight. Can you tell? This is me without coffee. Okay, imagine what I look and sound and act like when I'm highly caffeinated. Okay, count your lucky stars. One of the cool things about the way each of these chapters ends is it ends with a reflective question. So I'm going to end with the final reflective question from chapter 6 for you to consider tonight. My friends, part of the book launch party, do you believe that God wants to use you to impact the kingdom? Why or why not? I believe that a man with Parkinson's disease named Denny O'Leary, through his humility and faithfulness, has profoundly affected the kingdom in ways that he will never know this side of eternity. I'm convicted that Greg's father has profoundly affected the kingdom in ways that he has only finally awoken to once he entered into that kingdom. And the reminder of chapter 6, my friends, is that you are part of that chain reaction, that you will impact the kingdom for generations to come in ways that you can't even imagine right now, but in ways at some point in your life that you will wake up to. And what a gift it will be to realize that you are part of that chain reaction. So I want to thank you for being part of our celebration tonight. I want to thank you for believing, like I do, that the best days are in front of you and us. And Greg, I want to thank you for putting in front of us a book that is not only worthy of being read, but a book that is worthy of being lived. So brothers and sisters, God bless you. Have an awesome celebration tonight for this time. And until next time, my name is John O'Leary. Tonight is your day. Never settle and live inspired.
Wow, what a powerful, powerful word from John O'Leary. Yeah. Tonight has been full of practical wisdom. Remember to check out the resources online at gregholder.com/resources. The team has put together devotionals, group videos, and more to help you on the journey out of lukewarmness.
That's right. It's all there because we have to make this personal. I'm so grateful for John's vulnerability in telling a story about his dad, but I'll be honest with you, I could start to talk about my own story. There have been times in my own life where I've wondered if God could really use me, if I could be a part of what he's doing in the world. And I'm sure there have been times where you felt the same way. So listen, when you hear people saying no to that question, don't believe those lies. Because it's not true. Your choices matter, and they can have rippling effects throughout God's kingdom.
Yeah, and tonight is just the beginning. God is calling us into something, and it's really important that we lean in and try to hear what he's saying to us. It could start a chain reaction. That has been the word tonight. And all we have to do is take the first step towards hot or cold.
That's right. That's right. And our world's in desperate need of this kind of good news, and we have the opportunity to share it, to use our words and influences for the good, to vow to do things differently in this world today. But can I just kind of state the obvious? This is a book launch party. And so tonight is we're here because we want to help spread the message to our neighbors and our friends and our communities and our churches. So what if it wasn't like a big marketing campaign that got the word out on this? What if it was actually people like you and me who started this movement? See, there's two specific ways that we're going to ask you to start this chain reaction, or the ways that you can start a chain reaction. The first one is that you can get like 3 people in your life. Just think of 3 people who need this message of hope. It could be your pastor, a friend, a coworker, a neighbor, a roommate. This week, invite them to get on this journey with you. Send them a text, read the book together, talk about it, work through the topics, and then invite somebody else in, and then do that again and again and again, right?
Yeah, and here's the second way. So go ahead and pull out your phone and text social to 48099. You'll get a link and there'll be a couple of images with phrases. And pick the one that stands out to you the most. And why don't you go ahead and post that and hashtag Never Settle Book.
Yeah, that's right. And when you do that, just real quickly, it will work best if you save that image down to your phone and then share it on social media. And while we're on the subject of social media, just let me go back really quick. Those of you who kind of entered into the to try to get some of win the mug and some of the products, just so you know, the winner's been announced. So you can go to Greg's Instagram account to see that. Okay. But here's the thing. For me, my answer to that question that we're inviting you to share on social media, I don't ever want to settle for less than. For me, I don't want to settle for less than the very life that God has mapped out for me. Yeah. I want to live that life. And can you imagine what a chain reaction might begin if we started to share these messages of hope and we started to flood social media with some of this, if we as a community vowed to never settle.
Don't underestimate the effect that you have on other people. Do you believe that God will use you to impact the kingdom?
Okay, I can't wait to hear some of these stories. And I can't wait for us to share these stories together because we love stories. And I will tell you that the book is full of stories. And David's right, there are a few stories in there that are a little bit crazy. There's a couple that are on my wife Robin's all-time least favorite list. But I'm not going to leave you with that tonight. I do want to tell you one story, though. I was doing some work in Managua, Nicaragua, and it was time to catch a flight the next morning. We were trying to get out before some weather settled in. And so we're being sort of just distributed throughout this community, a very impoverished community. And I got to spend the night with a family that was about as generous and loving as any family I've ever been with. I was so humbled to be with them. I'm absolutely convinced that the dinner of black beans and warm tortillas that she made for us, it cost more than anything I've ever served to one of my guests. Like I said, I was humbled to the core. When it was time for us to go to bed, there was another person there with me from another church in the U.S., and so they escorted us out of the house proper and into this little area outside the house, and we were just so grateful. They were so gentle, so generous, and it was just this sort of these mud bricks in a wall and a tin roof and lots of open air and a torn curtain as the door, and that's where we were going to sleep. It was just 2 cots, and we were just so grateful. Thank you so much. I mean, it was just unbelievable what they were doing for us. And I put my backpack down, and all I can say is I didn't know this guy that I was with. We were just happened to be kind of, just assigned together. And he must have been working really hard that day because I was just getting my stuff ready for travel. It was an early day out the next day. And I'm pretty sure that he fell asleep before he hit the cot. And I guarantee you, before he timbered over and his head hit the pillow, he began moving into a deep and restful sleep that gave him such freedom. And how do I know this? Because this guy was snoring at a level I haven't heard maybe in a long, long time. It was an impressive sound is what I'm saying. It was the first sound of the night. So I pull the strand on this bare bulb that is the light of the room, and now I'm just kind of trying to get to my bed, my little cot, and ignoring what's going on, which literally sounded like a barrel full of chainsaws just next to me. And so I'm kind of trying to sleep and push that out of my ears, and then I kind of tuned into another sound. And I was like, well, wait, that's not him. In fact, that's not even coming from the same direction where he is. It's not to the right, it's to the left. And so I heard it, and it was a little crunching, clicking, whirring sound. And I thought, well, what is that? So I get my phone out, I turn the light on, and I just wanted to see what the sound was next to the wall next to me, this mud brick wall. Not a good idea, because what I saw then was a wall come to life with insects moving in and out of this mud wall with all of these holes. Now, I don't know how old you are, but some of you are old enough to remember a scene from Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. It was that. If you're not old enough to remember that, that's a good thing because you don't want this image in your head. All I'm telling you is that wall was full of creepy crawlies, and it was a sight to behold. So I want you to now imagine, I'm trying to fall asleep. I've got Texas Chainsaw to my right and a nightmare to my left. Ladies and gentlemen, let me present to you Insomnia Symphony number 1. There was no way I was going to sleep. Now, I tore a couple of pages out of my journal and wadded them up and put them in my ears. Two reasons. One, to maybe block out some of the noise, and I'm not going to lie to you, to keep things from crawling into my head. And so then when I had nothing else to do, I just started to pray. And it wasn't even for sleep. It was for the dawn. But at some place along the way, I did fall asleep, at least a little bit, into a restless sleep, and I was awakened to the third sound of the evening, and it was just, I couldn't even place what it was, but something was scurrying and scratching and just kind of looking underneath my cot. And I couldn't tell what it was, but by the time these things left, my phone was, I just didn't get to see what it was. I was like, well, wait a minute, I can't even make out running down that dirt path hallway. It wasn't a cat, it wasn't a dog, it sure wasn't a pig. What was it? It was and I couldn't place it. But I was ready the next time, and when I heard that sound, I thought, okay, it didn't turn out well the last time, but I'm gonna see what this is. I turned the light on my phone, I look under there, and you know what it was? It was a couple of roosters. And I was so relieved. Not just because roosters are less creepy than 5-inch millipedes, they are. But also because in my mind, if I'm seeing roosters, I start to think, well, maybe morning isn't far away. You see, the rest of the experience of that night and really the appearance of what I was going through right then gave me no indication that morning was coming. It was still dark. The sounds of the evening were still in full swing. But those roosters, just the sight of those roosters, just the sound of them scrounging underneath my bed, it filled this slightly freaked out heart with hope. And when they finally did crow at the dawn, I was thrilled. Why? Because they were announcing the dawn. You see, it really was a sound of hope. Now, there's a man by the name of Seth Horowitz who has a really fancy title to what he does. He's an auditory neuroscientist, and this is what Dr. Horowitz says. He says that we get these clues and context about the world we're in by the sounds we hear. Here's the quote: "Everything you hear has some kind of an impact on you and changes how you respond to the rest of the world." So let me ask you, what is it that you're hearing these days? Like, if you had to think about what's going on, are the sounds in our world, what are they? Are they mostly angry, or are they loud, or they're anything but comforting? You see, I don't know what you would answer, but for many of us, it would be disconcerting, it would be scary, it would be confusing, inconsistent, infuriating, exhausting, overwhelming, intimidating. It's all of these sounds, and no wonder some of us are tempted to play it bland and blend in instead of sticking out. No wonder some of us are thinking about holding back instead of moving forward. There are some days in this loud and angry world where it almost sounds good to settle. But gang, that's the point. This is the lie of the evil one. He wants to convince us that it's too ugly, that it's too dark, that it's too overwhelming and too hopeless out there. I want you to understand that it's true. We live in a world that is dark. We live in a world where the shadows still cling to the night. But if you're like me, I happen to believe that the resurrection of Jesus Christ makes a difference. You see, if the resurrection really happened, then I happen to believe that mind-bending, eternity-changing, destiny-altering miracle means that there is hope. It looks like it's dark out there, but you gotta hear me. There are roosters in the hallway. Now, for some of you, that sounds too happy, clappy, feel good to end. Seriously, Greg, that's how you're ending this thing? I get it. But I've seen too many people live through too many things with too much of God's goodness, clinging to too much of his strength to not believe that there is such a thing as hope. You see, I've just seen people go through really difficult times and lean on God and love God and to trust God. And that's you. You've leaned on God and you've experienced his grace, and you do wrap your strength around his strength, and you are trusting him, and you do have a history with him. Some of you right now are declaring to the world that you do trust God, that by the very actions of your words and in your raw and messy prayers, you are declaring to the heavens that you trust in the God of the universe. As you stumble in and out of a church each week, as you continue to just put one foot in front of the other and do one small step that nobody else is noticing, that is faithful, that is obedient, that is the right step. I just need you to know what you are doing is starting something that does move into eternity. I absolutely believe that. You see those words that Christia and Tim were reading that you sent us in a little bit ago, those words like shalom. Christia, I agree, that's a big word to me. Shalom and peace and gentleness and unity and truth and love. These are things, you're not crazy for longing and hoping and praying for those things. So one more time, when you teach a child to read, when a young husband helps his wife with an early onset dementia, when you forgive someone, when you move in close, when you serve with no strings attached, when you give and nobody else even knows about it, when you laugh deeply when something happens that's funny, when you cry openly with someone who is going through something, and when you don't have any words that you can say, you just sit there with them. When you are these kinds of people, you are shining the love of God into the dark corners of the world. And I'm telling you what, that's what it looks like to live a hot and cold, soothing and shocking life. And you are making a difference. So here we go. It is time. It is time to take that next step. And I don't know what that's going to be for you tonight, but I just want to thank you one more time for being a part of this. I want to thank you for being a part of what God is calling us to do. But what would it be? Can you imagine if we did invite some people with us and said, could we live this different, intentional, difference-making life? What if we loved and served outrageously well? What if we expressed our love boldly? What if we prayed out loud for each other and actually used each other's names? Can you even imagine what that would be like? I want to tell you, when that begins to happen in your life, listen up, soak it up. Let that sound echo in your ears, because it will remind you that you are not alone. And you're not alone. You see, the same Spirit that raised Jesus from the dead is now closer than your next breath. Jesus promised us this. And the Holy Spirit of God whispers and sometimes shouts in your ears that you are Abba's child. He breathes life into your tattered soul, and this too is the sound of hope. Like Gandalf said to Bilbo, there's more to you than you know. So in this shadow-filled world, there are roosters announcing the light of day. The night will not last. The power and the grace of our good God will win the day. So until that glorious day, until that moment when God puts it all back together, never lose hope, you children of the dawn. Until Jesus returns, never settle, you sons and daughters of the King. Make a choice to make a difference. And then behold the power of God in 1,000 times 1,000 chain reactions to His glory. And I believe that could all begin like right now. So thank you for being with us.
I want to thank you guys for joining us tonight. We wish we could have gathered together in one big room to learn and to pray and worship and celebrate together. We wish we could have surrounded Greg and let him know how proud and excited we are of him. But since we can't do that these days, we have the next best thing.
Yeah. Have you ever been in one of those rooms where you were surrounded by a bunch of people who were all praying for God to show up, for hope to break in, for the light to pierce through the darkness? I can remember moments in my life where I've been surrounded by that kind of prayer, and that's exactly how we want to end things tonight. So wherever you are right now, I'm going to invite you in this moment to just stop and slow down. Don't move so quickly to the next thing. But let's allow some space right now for the Spirit to do what He does. Like Christia said, I know we all wish that we could have gathered together in one big room and just prayed bold prayers and pray for each other and pray for everything that God is doing. But since we can't do that, what we've done is we've asked leaders here locally and really around the country to pray to God that he would do something mighty in our world. And who knows? Maybe it could even just begin to happen in some small ways with us tonight. So you need to know there are people who have been praying for this book, but they've been praying for you. They've been praying for you that chain reactions would begin to happen. So we're going to pray together here in just a moment.
And as we end the night, we want the sound of hope ringing in your ears to remind you that God is not done with you. He's not done with this world, and he's calling us to take the next faithful step. So I want you to take a moment, listen to the words of these prayers, let them wash over you.
Pray a blessing over my friend. God, I'm asking you, would you put just a covering over him and the Never Settle book? God, get it into the hands of the people who you want to read this.
We will take up that cry to not settle, to not live a lukewarm life. God, to move into the future that you have for us.
You knew way before we did that Never Settle is exactly what our world and our church and all followers of Jesus, me included, needed to read and apply. These biblical truths and stories have been beautifully woven together.
I pray that all who read it would be touched in big and bold ways and that they would never settle. But most of all, I pray that Greg's book would speak to readers in ways only you could ensure.
And I ask that you would continue to bless these endeavors, for our labor in you is never in vain. May the rush of your Spirit be his breathless chase.
And God, I pray that you would bless this book and that you would use Never Settle as a way to draw people into the divine life that you have in store for them. God, for each of us, help us to not settle for the tepid reality, but to reach for the one that you are calling us to, the one you desire for us.
I pray for all those that will read Never Settle. I pray that this book reminds them of your goodness, your faithfulness, your steadfastness. In a world that is changing daily, God, we need you to be our anchor.
Lord, we need these truths right now. We need to learn. We need to be reminded of some really important things in these days.
So God, I believe that even in the midst of a season where it is so difficult, that you strike rocks and water gushes out, streams flow abundantly, and that you're not calling us to sit around and wait, but you are calling us to step in, to never settle in our own lives and in the world around us.
God, we ask that you would use this book to breathe hope into people in a time and a year that we desperately need hope.
So we want to lift this book up to you right now. God, as you've anointed Greg's messages week after week, that is what we pray for this book. Send it far. May it be read and then spread by word of mouth. May our groups be filled with rich discussions, and then out of those discussions, may there be bold actions, life-altering decisions, and leaps of faith that have been teetering on the edge for far too long.
Let them have peace in their home, peace in their hearts, and let them continue to be a light in a dark world of what should be done, how it can be done, and how we get to serve the kingdom together.
Allow the people who read this book to be convicted with what does it mean to not settle. You've called us to live a life that is full, and we get to live that life of fullness because of who you are and what you've done and the grace that you've given to us.
Let this book be a spark that starts a revolution.
The world needs this message right now of never settle.
And I pray that this book would be used mightily to change many people's lives.
So, Father, I come and I pray that your anointing rests upon this book, that many will come to know you in the power of your might, that your presence just oozes from the pages, that they fall into the room of every individual that reads this book, that they will experience you and encounter you in a deeper way, that they will know you for just a God of love and a God of truth that pursues them, and that they will never settle for anything less, that you are the God that pursues us. You are the God that loves us unconditionally. And let that book bring those words to life in the hearts of so many people. Amen.